At 3:27 on a Wednesday afternoon, I watched an ambulance back out of my driveway while my father was lying on my living room floor. Not slowly, not carefully back out. Reverse lights blinking. Backup alarms screaming. Paramedic at the rear waving his arms because the ambulance could not turn around. 3 concrete planters had been placed across the emergency turnaround at the end of my driveway. Huge square planters, freshly poured, filled with ornamental grass, stamped with little brass hoe tags that said, "Common Area Beautification Project. Do not move, do not move." My father was inside, gray-faced, sweating, and gripping his chest while the paramedics tried to load him onto a stretcher. The driveway was narrow. The road in front of my house curved sharply. The original subdivision plan required a clear turnaround so emergency vehicles could pull in, load a patient, turn around, and leave forward. That was the reason the turnaround existed. And the HOA had filled it with planters because my driveway looked too industrial. When the ambulance crew realized they could not turn, they had to back all the way down the driveway, reposition near the street, and carry my father farther than they should have in 90-degree heat, one paramedic muttered. "Who blocked this?" I said the HOA. He looked at me like he hoped I was joking. I was not. By 4:10, my father was in the emergency room. By 5, the ambulance supervisor had requested photos of the obstruction. By 7:30, the fire marshal was standing in my driveway, measuring the clearance, and by Friday morning the HOA sent me a violation notice for unauthorized removal pressure, hostile conduct toward approved landscaping, and failure to maintain driveway aesthetics consistent with community standards. Driveway aesthetics. My father had chest pain, an ambulance could not turn around, and they were worried about ornamental grass. Then the HOA president sent a demand for $6,900. Claiming that emergency responders and my family had disturbed the landscaping and caused reputational harm by telling neighbors the planters were unsafe. Reputational harm. That was when my shock became very cold. Because the HOA had made one mistake, my driveway camera had recorded the installation. It caught the landscaper asking whether the planters blocked emergency access. It caught the HOA president saying, "The owner complains about everything. Put them there before she files another objection," and it caught the board treasurer laughing as he said, "If an ambulance ever needs that much room, she can call us." 3 weeks later, the fire marshal would read the subdivision emergency access plan out loud in a packed HOA meeting. The ambulance report would document delayed patient loading. The county would order every planter removed. The HOA's insurer would take over, the president would resign, and the board's beautification project would cost them $143,000 in medical transport delay claims. Legal fees, emergency access remediation, county penalties, insurance costs, driveway repair, and settlement payments. But that afternoon, standing in the street while the ambulance backed away from my house, all I knew was this. The HOA had decorated the one place help needed to turn around, and then blamed me for ruining the view. I bought that house because of my father, not because he lived with me at the time, because I knew one day he might need to. My father, Raymond, was 74, stubborn, proud, and allergic to admitting weakness. He had spent most of his life as a diesel mechanic. He could identify an engine problem by sound, fix a lawnmower with parts from a coffee can, and insult a bad socket wrench like it had personally betrayed him. After my mother died, he stayed in the old family house for as long as he could, but his knees were bad. His blood pressure was worse, and after a minor stroke scared all of us, I started looking for a place where he could eventually stay with me without feeling trapped. I needed a one-story house, wide hallways, a flat entry, a bedroom near a bathroom, and because I am the daughter of a man who taught me to think practically, I needed a driveway that an ambulance could use without gymnastics. That is how I found the house at the end of Juniper Court in Magnolia Reserve, a planned HOA community outside Greenville, South Carolina. The house was not perfect. The kitchen was dated. The roof would need work in a few years. The backyard sloped more than I wanted, but the driveway had something rare, a paved turnaround at the top, just wide enough for delivery trucks, medical vans, and emergency vehicles. It looked plain, almost ugly, a half-moon of concrete off the side of the driveway near the garage. No fountain, no shrubs, no stone border, just open pavement. My real estate agent said some buyers saw it as wasted space. I saw safety during closing. The survey showed that the turnaround sat on my lot, but was also referenced in the subdivision emergency access plan because Juniper Court ended in a narrow curve. The developer had been required to preserve enough turning area for fire and medical vehicles at the last two homes. My attorney pointed to the plan and said, "Do not let anybody block that." I remember laughing. Who would block an ambulance turnaround? HOAs, apparently. For the first few years, nobody bothered it. My father visited on weekends, then once a week, then for longer stretches. Eventually, he moved into the front bedroom after a blood pressure episode that made him pretend he had only stood up too fast. He hated being cared for. He hated needing help. But he liked the house. He liked sitting in the garage with the door open, watching squirrels, and telling me my mower blade sounded dull. He liked that medical vans could pull close when he had appointments. He liked that he did not have to walk far from the driveway. That turnaround became part of our routine. Grocery deliveries used it. The physical therapist used it. His cardiology transport used it. Once, a fire department medical unit used it when Dad fell in the bathroom and needed help getting up. The crew pulled in, turned around easily, and left without drama. That was how it was supposed to work. Then Magnolia Reserve elected a new HOA board. The president was Elise Warren. Elise believed every visible surface in the neighborhood needed to express cohesive curb appeal. She said that phrase constantly. Curb appeal to her was not a selling point. It was a religion. She hated utility areas. She hated exposed concrete. She hated visible side driveways. She hated anything that reminded her houses were lived in by people with needs instead of staged for aerial photos. At the first meeting after she became president, she announced a beautification review of high-visibility lots. Because my house sat at the end of the court, mine was one of them. I received a notice saying my driveway turnaround appeared unfinished and detracted from the visual harmony of the cul-de-sac. I responded with the survey and emergency access plan. I explained that the turnaround was required and medically important for my father. The HOA replied that they were not proposing to remove access, only soften the appearance. Soften, that word should have warned me. Because when an HOA wants to soften something, they usually mean they want to cover it until it stops functioning. I told them in writing, no landscaping, planter, barrier, sign, boulder, fixture, or decorative feature may be placed in the emergency turnaround or reduce vehicle clearance. They did not answer. 2 weeks later, the concrete planters arrived. The landscapers came on a Tuesday morning, 3 men in orange shirts. A flatbed trailer and a small forklift rolled into Juniper Court while I was at work. My father was home, but he did not hear much from the living room because the television was loud, and he refused to admit it. My driveway camera caught the whole thing at 10:14. The flatbed backed up to the top of my driveway. At 10:19, Elise Warren arrived in her white SUV. At 10:22, the landscaper pointed to the half-moon turnaround and asked whether the planters were supposed to go there. Elise said, "Yes." The landscaper said, "This looks like a vehicle turn area." Elise said, "It's as an eyesore." The landscaper said, "Will emergency vehicles need it?" That was the question that should have stopped everything. Elise looked toward my house and said, "The owner complains about everything. Put them there before she files another objection." Then the board treasurer, Martin Cole, stepped into frame holding a clipboard. He laughed and said, "If an ambulance ever needs that much room, she can call us." They all laughed. The landscaper did not, but he installed the planters anyway. By the time I came home, the half-moon turnaround was gone. Not physically, functionally. 3 concrete planters sat across it in a curved line, like a decorative barricade. Each one was nearly 4 feet wide, heavy enough that 2 people could not move it, and planted with tall ornamental grass that brushed against the side of my truck when I pulled in. I parked on the street and stared at them. My father came to the doorway with his walker and said, "Those are in the wrong damn place." I emailed the HOA immediately. I attached the emergency access plan again. I attached photos. I asked for immediate removal, no response. The next morning, I called the management company. The property manager told me the board had approved beautification improvements and that residents were not allowed to modify common visual features without permission. I said, "The planters were on my driveway turnaround." She said, "They were community-facing enhancements." I said, "They blocked emergency access." She said she would pass my concern along. Pass my concern along. That phrase means the concern will be buried under someone else's lunch. For 2 days, I parked carefully around the planters and avoided letting Dad see how angry I was. I called the county fire prevention office and left a message. I sent another email. I printed everything and put it in a folder labeled turnaround because I had already learned that with HOAs being right means nothing if you cannot prove when you said it. Then Wednesday afternoon happened. Dad was in the living room watching an old car auction show. I was in the kitchen cutting tomatoes when I heard him make a sound I had never heard from him before, not a yell. A small, surprised breath. I found him halfway off the recliner, one hand pressed to his chest, skin gray around his mouth. I called 911. The dispatcher stayed on the line while I unlocked the door. Moved furniture, found Dad's medication list, and tried to keep my voice steady. The ambulance arrived fast. I heard it before I saw it. Then I heard the backup alarm. That did not make sense. I ran to the doorway and saw the ambulance driver trying to angle around the planters. The front end could not swing wide enough. The rear wheels were too close to the edge of the drive. The paramedic in the passenger seat got out, looked at the planters, looked at the driveway, and shook his head. They had to back down and reposition. Inside, Dad kept saying he was fine. He was not fine. No man who is fine sweats through his shirt while gripping your wrist like it is the only solid thing in the room. The paramedics brought the stretcher in, treated him, and loaded him carefully. But because the ambulance could not turn at the top, they had to move him farther, reposition the stretcher, and load from a less ideal angle near the street. It added minutes. Maybe only a few. But when someone's chest hurts, minutes become huge. After they left, Elise appeared at the end of the court. She had not come when the ambulance arrived. She came after. She looked at the tire marks near the planters and said, "I hope they didn't damage the new installation." That was the first time in my life I understood how a sentence could make your whole body go cold. I said, "My father is on his way to the hospital," she said, "and I am sorry for that, but you cannot blame approved landscaping for a medical event." Approved landscaping. My father was in an ambulance, and Elise was protecting planters. At the hospital, Dad was stabilized. It was not a full heart attack, thank God, but it was serious. The doctors called it a cardiac event requiring monitoring and medication changes. He stayed overnight. He complained about the food before he complained about his chest, which helped me breathe again. When I got home, the planters were still there. Of course they were. I downloaded the camera footage before I even changed clothes. Then I requested the ambulance report. The EM's supervisor called me the next morning. He was polite in a way that made me more nervous. Not less. He asked whether I had photos of the driveway before the planters were installed. I said yes. He asked whether I had the subdivision emergency access plan. I said yes. He asked whether the planters had been placed recently. I said 2 days before the call. He said the crew had documented restricted turnaround access due to large fixed planters obstructing maneuvering space. Fixed planters. Obstructing. Those words mattered. I called an attorney named Nora Ellis, who handled property disputes, HOA enforcement, and emergency access cases. I sent her the survey, closing documents, HOA notices, my warning emails, the emergency access plan, photos, camera footage, Dad's medical transport history, the EMS report, and Elise's fine notice when it arrived. Nora watched the installation clip and said they were warned in real time by their own landscaper. That changed everything. She sent preservation letters to the HOA, the management company. Elise, Martin, the landscaper, and the HOA attorney. She demanded board minutes, work orders, invoices, landscaping plans, emails, text messages, photos, complaints about my driveway, emergency access records, and communications about my father or medical vehicles. Then she called the county fire marshal. His name was Andrew Hale. He came out that evening with a measuring wheel and a copy of the approved subdivision plan. He did not care about ornamental grass. He cared about turning radius. He measured the driveway, then the turnaround, then the space left after the planters. Then he asked who placed them. I said the HOA. He looked at the brass tags on the planters and nodded like the planters had just confessed. The original subdivision plan was clear because Juniper Court ended in a tight curve. The upper driveways of the last two homes had required unobstructed emergency maneuvering areas. Mine was one of them. The paved half-moon beside my driveway was not decorative. It was not extra parking. It was not available for beautification. It was emergency access clearance. Andrew wrote a preliminary notice requiring the planters be removed pending review. Elise refused. Not directly. She sent an email saying the HOA needed time to evaluate whether the county plan applied to current landscaping enhancements. Current landscaping enhancements. Nora forwarded that email to the fire marshal. Andrew's reply was only 2 sentences: the plan applies. Remove the obstruction. That should have ended it. It did not. The HOA sent me a violation notice instead. It accused me of pressuring vendors, creating resident alarm, interfering with approved landscaping, and failing to maintain my driveway area in accordance with community standards. It also warned that any attempt to move the planters would result in fines and possible legal action. Then came the $6,900 demand, planter repair contingency, vendor remobilization fee, legal review, management administration, community reputation harm. Nora laughed when she read community reputation harm, not because it was funny, because people reveal themselves in the invoices they invent. Then the documents arrived. The landscaper had emailed Elise before installation, confirming placement in paved turn area. This may affect vehicle clearance. Recommend written confirmation regarding emergency access. Elise replied. Approved by board. Install as marked. Martin replied. Owner will object, do not engage. Then, after the ambulance call, Martin texted Elise, we need to make this about her overreacting. Not the planters. Elise wrote back. Agreed. The medical issue is unfortunate, but unrelated. Unrelated. The ambulance report said otherwise. The legal twist came from a page nobody on the HOA board had bothered to read. Sheet C7 of the original subdivision plan, emergency vehicle access and maneuvering layout. It showed the road curve, the driveway approach, the required clearance, and my half-moon turnaround marked as private drive emergency maneuvering area. Keep clear. Keep clear. 2 words, so simple a board president could have understood them if she had wanted to. Nora explained that the HOA had architectural authority over certain exterior appearances. But that authority did not allow them to block a recorded emergency maneuvering area. It did not matter whether the planters were pretty. It did not matter whether Elise thought concrete looked unfinished. It did not matter that the brass tags said do not move. HOA rules do not outrank emergency access requirements, and because the turnaround was on my property, the HOA also had a second problem. They had placed heavy structures on my lot without my permission. That meant the case was not only emergency access obstruction, it was also trespass and interference with property rights. The board tried to argue the planters were not permanent because they could technically be moved by equipment. Andrew, the fire marshal, answered that fixed in place for emergency access purposes means not readily movable by a resident or first responder without equipment and delay. Concrete planters requiring a forklift counted. Then Nora uncovered another issue. Elise had not held a proper board vote. The beautification project had been approved generally, but the specific placement on my turnaround had been decided by Elise and Martin after the meeting. The invoice showed a handwritten note. Install at Larkin driveway curve to screen concrete pad. Larkin, my last name. Not community common area. My driveway curve, the landscaper insurance company got nervous fast. Their representative contacted Nora and said the crew had relied on HOA direction but had questioned the placement. Nora said the video agreed. That pushed more pressure onto the HOA. Then, the hospital documentation and EMS report became part of the file. Nora was careful not to exaggerate. She did not claim the planters caused my father's cardiac event. They did not. But they did cause access complications during the emergency response. That was documented by the ambulance crew. Photos, video, and fire marshal measurements. That distinction made the claim stronger. The issue was not that the HOA made my father sick. The issue was that when he needed help, they had made help harder. That is enough. Nora sent a demand letter requiring immediate removal of the planters, restoration of the turnaround, reimbursement for driveway damage, withdrawal of all violations, written correction to the neighborhood, payment of legal fees, compensation for emergency access interference, and adoption of a policy preventing any landscaping, barrier, fixture, planter, sign, or decorative object from being placed in emergency access areas. The HOA attorney responded that the association wanted to avoid escalation. Nora replied, "Then move the planters." They did not, so the county escalated for them. The county site inspection happened the following Monday. Andrew Hale arrived with another fire prevention officer, a county planner, and the EMS supervisor. Nora stood beside me. Elise came with Martin, the property manager, the HOA attorney, and a board member, who looked like he had just discovered meetings can have consequences. Dad insisted on sitting in the garage. I told him he should rest, he said. I want to see them explain the damn grass. So I let him sit there with a bottle of water and his blood pressure cuff on the table beside him. Andrew began with the plan. Sheet C7, Emergency Vehicle Access and Maneuvering Layout. He pointed to the half moon, then to the planters sitting on top of it. Then he read the label. Private Drive Emergency Maneuvering Area. Keep clear, the HOA attorney said. The association did not intend to interfere with emergency response. The EMS supervisor opened the ambulance report. He read, Ambulance unable to complete turnaround due to fixed planters obstructing maneuvering area. Unit required backing maneuver and alternate patient loading position. Dad looked at Elise and said, Sounds like interference to me. Nobody told him to be quiet. Then Nora played the installation footage, the landscaper asking if emergency vehicles needed the space. Elise saying, The owner complains about everything. Put them there before she files another objection. Martin laughing, If an ambulance ever needs that much room, she can call us. The EMS supervisor did not move. That somehow made it worse. Andrew issued the county order on site. The planters had to be removed within 24 hours. The driveway turnaround had to be restored and kept clear. The HOA had to submit a written emergency access compliance plan. The board had to inspect all other beautification features near fire lanes, hydrants, easements, cul-de-sacs, and emergency maneuvering areas. Future landscaping projects required access review before installation. Elise tried to ask whether the planters could be relocated slightly. Andrew said, Out of the maneuvering area. She asked whether ornamental grass could remain. Andrew said, Out of the maneuvering area. Martin asked whether there was an appeal process. Andrew said, Yes. After removal that was satisfying, in a way I will not pretend to be mature about. The planters were gone the next morning. A forklift removed them, while Dad sat in the garage like a retired king, watching invaders retreat. The concrete underneath was scratched and stained. One planter had left a rust mark from the drainage insert. The edge of the driveway had a chip from installation. Nora documented all of it. The HOA meeting came a week later. It was packed. Not because everyone cared about my driveway, because people had started checking their own corners of the neighborhood. Someone noticed a decorative boulder near a hydrant. Someone else noticed a bench installed too close to a service access road. A retired firefighter found shrubs narrowing a fire lane near the clubhouse. Elise's beautification program suddenly looked less like charm and more like liability with flowers. Andrew attended the meeting and gave a formal presentation. He did not yell. He did not need to. He showed the plan, the photos, the measurements, the ambulance report, and the installation video. Then he read Martin S. line out loud. "If an ambulance ever needs that much room, she can call us." The room went silent, because by then everyone knew an ambulance had needed that much room. Elise resigned before the recall vote finished. Martin stepped down as treasurer that night. The HOA withdrew every violation against me and sent a written correction to residents, stating that the planters had been improperly placed in a required emergency maneuvering area and that my objections had been valid. Valid. That word felt small after everything, but I took it. The insurance process lasted months. The final documented resolution reached $143,000. The largest part was not the planters. It was emergency access, remediation, legal fees, driveway repair, county compliance work, insurance administration, EMS documentation costs, medical transport delay claim, settlement payment, and the required review of every HOA-installed object near emergency routes. The HOA also had to adopt a new access clearance policy. No planter, no boulder, no bench, no sign. No decorative fence, no seasonal display, no landscaping feature could be installed near a driveway turnaround, hydrant, fire lane, easement, cul-de-sac bulb, utility access, or emergency maneuvering area without documented review. Dad said the policy had too many words. Then he pointed at the empty turnaround and said they could have just written, "Don't put crap where trucks need to go." He was right. The turnaround looks plain again now. Just a half moon of concrete beside my driveway. No ornamental grass, no brass hoe tags, no concrete boxes pretending to be community improvement. Plain, open, beautiful in the way useful things are beautiful when someone you love might need them. Dad came home 2 days after the hospital visit with new medication, more appointments, and a stronger opinion about HOA boards than any cardiologist could treat. He still sits in the garage sometimes, watching the end of Juniper Court like he is guarding the border. Every so often he points at the empty turnaround and says, "Best looking nothing I ever saw, I agree. The new HOA board is quieter. They still send reminders about mailbox numbers and trash cans." Because HOAs cannot become completely normal overnight, but they are careful around emergency access now. The decorative boulder near the hydrant disappeared. The shrubs near the clubhouse fire lane were cut back. The bench by the service road was moved. People started noticing space differently, not as empty as necessary. I kept a folder labeled turnaround inside were the survey, sheet C7. My warning emails, the camera still, the EMS report, Andrew S. County order, the HOA correction letter, the settlement statement, and one printed image from the installation footage. Elise pointing. Martin laughing. The landscaper hesitating. That image mattered to me because it showed the exact moment. Common sense tried to enter the conversation, and the HOA told it to leave. So if your HOA, neighbor, landscaper, developer, or architectural committee ever places planters, boulders, benches, fences, signs, gates, decorative walls, seasonal displays, or landscaping in a driveway turnaround, fire lane, hydrant zone, access easement, or cul-de-sac, do not assume it is harmless because it looks nice. Pull the plat. Check the emergency access plan. Photograph the clearance. Save your emails. Ask the fire marshal. And if someone tells you it is just beautification, ask one question. Can an ambulance still turn around? Because beauty that blocks help is not beauty. It is risk with flowers in it. If this story made you think of someone who needs to hear it, share it with them. Leave your thoughts in the comments. Save the video. And subscribe for more stories about ordinary homeowners who learned that property rights are not just lines on paper. Sometimes they are the space an ambulance needs. I did not beat Elise by dragging the planters into the street. I beat her by proving why they never belonged there. And 3 months later, when Dad had another scare, the ambulance pulled into my driveway, turned around in one smooth motion, loaded him safely, and drove forward toward the hospital. No backup alarm, no blocked clearance, no ornamental grass, just help turning exactly where help was always supposed to turn.